So this is interesting. Look what I just did. I closed the report and we came back into the code and we're broken here on this line just after this new line that I added for demonstration purposes. And what it says is the create count equals the create count plus 1. G underscore, so it's a global variable. That's my naming convention. And the reason we broke here is because of this watch. So this is an example of where watches can be very helpful. Especially in a situation where you don't know the application very well. You're taking it over from someone else. Let's say that application has a lot of global variables and you have no idea where all they get updated during real world use of the application. Sure, you can do Control F and go find all occurrences, but you don't know when, and you could set a breakpoint at each of those lines, but that's a lot of work. This is essentially setting a breakpoint on each of those lines. Because what I did was I created this watch expression. I can edit it so you guys can see what I did. I'm saying for this expression, in all procedures and in all modules, break when the value changes. So that means globally throughout the application, if anywhere for any reason this integer is value changes, then the break will happen, and we are at the line where it did happen. So that can be really helpful. You can also narrow this down to only a single module. For example, you can watch even a local variable inside of one procedure. But it's especially powerful, I think, for situations where you're looking more globally. And you're not limited to variables. That's why it says expression rather than variable. So you can also put in simple expressions that get evaluated while you're debugging. And then if the expression becomes true, for example, break when value is true, then, for example, I could say order detail count equals 5. If that becomes true, then the break would happen. All right, F5. A couple of other things that I haven't mentioned yet that can also be very helpful. I'm going to go back in here. Remember that we didn't have this line of code. One thing that we could do here is use another debug feature. Will indeed be available. We are recording right now, and we will make that available as soon as we've had a chance to perhaps edit it a little bit, but put it out on our website. So a statement that we haven't discussed yet is the debug object, which has only 2 methods, both of them very helpful. Debug.print, would be very helpful, because then when I run this again, of course I'm getting my error, the 2 variable values are printed, and perhaps the light bulb will go on that 0 is not a good divisor. And that's very helpful. You can do a message box. A lot of beginning programmers do this. There are a few situations where a message box is not the best idea, especially when you're debugging things that are related to focus. Because when you do a message box, you also lose focus. Whereas if you do a debug.print, it just writes to the immediate window without changing focus. You can also leave debug.prints in there for a long time, because maybe it prints important information about the operation of the application, and only when you're truly satisfied that this new feature is rock solid, you may do a little final replace and replace debug.print with single quote debug.print to comment them all out. Very interesting. The other one is debug.assert. Also a very important method. And so you can use that one to test if a condition is true. For example, in this case, we know that we're about to divide by b, that b is going to be the divisor, and so we know that b cannot be 0. So b not equals 0. What that does. I come back in here and I say run again. Look, it stops here. And because it says this assertion of yours is not true. B is in fact 0, and that's bad. And so I use this a lot to test function arguments. I'm writing the function. I don't know exactly who's going to be calling my function, but I do know that I don't want b to be 0, as an example. And so I might put in a debug.assert so that if my colleague is using my function, passes in 0, the debug.assert will fire and say, maybe I'll have a little comment here. That, okay, that's unfortunate. That will tell them that, not to do this. Assert is very good, especially during the development phase of the application. This is not something that you would rely on at runtime, because frankly, if you have an ACCDE, this gets compiled out. It won't fire. It won't do anything. So this is really just when you're developing, when you're implementing new code, you can use debug.assert just to test if your assumptions are correct. Another example might be, I'm opening a record set and I expect at least one row. I have more than one row. It's an assumption that I'm testing, that I know that I don't want that. And so debug.assert for the record count to be 1 would be appropriate in that kind of situation. Topic. Watch variables. Okay. Yes. Let's close out of here and go to another scenario. Saying it might be helpful for a developer if they are cleaning up data. Yeah, there's all kinds of, a lot of people are not even aware of this, but once you're aware of this, you can find all kinds of ways to use this and just leave it in your code for the longest time, because if something later on goes sideways, then these asserts will start firing and you realize that, oh, I'm calling this wrong, or my data is not the way I expected it to be.
So it's almost like setting parameters and you can't fall outside of those?
Yeah. It's like a validation kind of thing. Yes, it's testing an assumption. Mm-hmm. My code really only works if this assumption is true. So I want to be notified if it isn't. Mm-hmm. I don't expect it, but if it does happen, I want to notify, because then I've done something wrong. I've done something illogical. Another really good example is this one here. Select case, my variable, case 1, 2, do this, case 2 do that, and then I always write case else, debug.assert false. So this will always fire unexpected case value. So I expect, and I expect only 1 or 2. If I get anything else, 0, -3, I want that to assert and say, oh, stop. That's outside of what I was expecting. This can happen if you're building new cases. And in other parts of the application, you already have case 3 implemented. You just forgot to do it here. It's nice that this thing asserts and lets you know that something hasn't been implemented yet. Because otherwise, if my var is actually 3, 2 won't happen. Nothing else will happen. The code will continue and probably not do exactly what you are hoping for.